Ernest R. Davis was an underdog from the day he was born in New Salem, Pennsylvania, until he died just 23 short years later in Cleveland, Ohio. According to Merriam-Webster, the definition of underdog is a loser or predicted loser in a struggle or contest, and a victim of injustice or persecution. Somehow, Ernie Davis must have never learned this word. If he had, it probably would have only made him work harder. The many firsts bestowed on him during his life and sports career made his legacy legendary. Ernie met adversity with class and honor, even as he had leukemia, which inevitably took his life. Ernie grew up an African-American boy living in the era of segregation. The struggles and challenges of merely getting to and from school would have been enough for any family to endure, not to mention being the son of a widow who could not care for him. He lived with his grandparents in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, until he was 12. He then moved to Elmira, New York, to live with his mother and stepfather. Young Ernie had a passion for sports, including football, baseball, and basketball. There is a scene in The Express where Ernie is shown to be reading a passage from the Bible, 1 Corinthians 10. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and His grace to me was not in vain. No, I worked harder than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me. Perhaps it was a higher power that gave Ernie his athletic ability and desire to achieve greatness in sports, like his idols Jackie Robinson and Jim Brown. Jack Roosevelt Robinson, also known as Jackie, was the first African American to play baseball for Major League Baseball in 1947. The African American community revered him for his impact and contributions to the civil rights movement. James Nathaniel Brown, better known as Jim, was a star fullback for the Cleveland Browns. He was also a college football All-American at Syracuse University, played lacrosse, participated in track and field, and was on the basketball team. So it is easy to see how he inspired Ernie. It is possible that he could have been influenced by the sports fan cultures he was surrounded by in Elmira, which his school buddies were probably members of as well. However, in all fairness, it was likely the media that played a role in his enticement and motivation to achieve his goal of playing football. After all, Ernie was able to watch his favorite football team on television. He could also listen to the games broadcast on the radio. If he had access to a newspaper, he could indeed read all about the great plays that Jim Brown or Jackie Robinson had made the night before. If fans are not attending a live sporting event, they rely on media sources and outlets to keep informed on their favorite sports teams or fantasy sports players. Davis had positive role models growing up in Elmira. His parent-child communication while participating in youth sports was probably precious to him. He played football in the small Fry League, and while attending Elmira Free Academy, he lettered 11 times in 3 sports. He was also All-American both his junior and senior years for his high school teams in football and basketball. Without the support of his parents and grandparents, Davis may not have been so motivated to make a name for himself in sports. In the film, The Express, Davis's family is portrayed as caring and encouraging of Ernie living a respectful life, honoring God, and being a civil human being regardless of the racial turmoil going on all around him. This theme plays out throughout the film, focusing on race relations in sports and outside of sports. African Americans were not awarded scholarships as a regular practice in the 1950s. However, more than 30 colleges and universities extended offers to Davis to play football. The advantage went to Syracuse, since that is where his favorite football star, Jim Brown, played. Brown had just signed to play in the National Football League with the Cleveland Browns during Ernie's senior year of high school. Brown tells Davis that Coach Schwartzwalder will make him faster, run harder, and better in the movie The Express. With Brown's backing, head coach Ben Schwartzwalder recruited Davis to attend Syracuse University and play football for the Orangemen. Ernie became the first African American on the freshman squad and was the top rusher on varsity as a sophomore. As a sophomore, he accumulated 686 yards on 98 carries and 10 touchdowns, gaining the nickname the Elmira Express and the first of 3 All-America awards. The player-coach relationship Davis and Schwartzwalder built throughout the years was undeniable. The respect they had developed for one another was echoed by the success of the Syracuse football team. 2 bowl games and a national championship were the rewards that Davis and his teammates earned in just 3 years. Schwartzwalder was a military man, and his coaching method was all about discipline. He was the head coach at Syracuse from 1949 to 1973, with a 178-win, 96-loss, and 3-tie record. Coach Schwartzwalder and Davis made a great combination, with Ernie's passion and talent paired with Schwartzwalder's coaching style and respect for the sport of football. 1959 was their year. The team sailed to an undefeated 11-0 record and topped the all-white Texas Longhorns football team in the 1960 Cotton Bowl Classic in Dallas, Texas. Even with the game being so racially powered, the 23-14 win earned the Orangemen their only national championship to date. Schwartzwalder's prejudices were likely overcome by his desire to coach terrific football players. At Syracuse, he produced such greats as Jim Brown, Ernie Davis, Floyd Little, Jim Nantz, and Larry Csonka. While Davis was a college football standout at Syracuse University in Syracuse, New York, his college career's most significant accomplishment was winning the coveted Heisman Trophy. This notoriety came on the heels of winning Most Valuable Player for his performance in the Cotton Bowl Classic held in January 1960. Ernie was the first African American to win the award from the Downtown Athletic Club of Lower Manhattan in New York City. The Downtown Athletic Club is a private, social, men-only club established in 1926 by a group of lawyers. The trophy was given its name in honor of the late John Heisman, who served as the club's athletic director from 1930 to 1936. The recipient is selected by sportscasters and writers from across the nation. Formerly known as the Downtown Athletic Club Trophy, the Heisman honor was traditionally awarded to white top-performing college football players for 26 years before Davis earned the nod. This title signifies college football's Player of the Year, and they are selected at the end of the college football season. Once again, media used its influence to determine him for this distinction. He was an appropriate choice considering that the mass media reported his game statistics during his years with the Orangemen. Davis was thought to be the next Jim Brown and even wore number 44 on his jersey, which had belonged to Brown. His performance in the Cotton Bowl Classic and chosen as MVP solidified the committee's choice. Ernie also broke Syracuse records maintained by Brown for yards rushing and points scored. The most significant thing separating Brown and Davis was the Heisman. The fact that African American athletes were gaining more media attention during the civil rights movement was unprecedented. Before Davis was born, the social and athletic barriers set forth were now being broken and broadcast in print, television, and radio. For Davis to win the highest honor in college football was a great tribute to his upbringing and morality. Brown ranked 5th in the Heisman hopefuls in 1956, so an African American to finally be selected 5 years later was amazing. President John F. Kennedy, a supporter of the African American civil rights movement, arranged a private meeting to congratulate Davis after the award presentation while they were both in New York. According to the website theblackdetour.com, only 6 African American athletes were of any significance before Ernie Davis became a phenomenon. 2 years before the Heisman selection, Davis was voted MVP of the Cotton Bowl game he shined in and was not allowed in the dining room after the award presentation due to segregation rules. This form of exclusion was just another sign of the times that racial inequality was alive and well in Texas. If there was a proverbial glass ceiling on the Heisman Trophy Award, it was shattered by Ernie Davis. His societal predisposition of being a victim of injustice or persecution was just not something he chose to believe or accept. In his way, Davis impacted the sports world not by allowing outside influences to ascertain his outcomes. He was determined to be in control of his circumstances and deal with the consequences. His passion and love for football were indeed what gave him the air in his lungs and gave him a purpose to embrace. Regardless of how often his skin color was called to question, he answered with a swift and dignified response. He refused to be the villain that society was so willing to define him as simply because he was African American. Bigotry and racism were rampant in the 1960s, and with segregation on its way out of schools and public places, it was time for sports to become a platform for civil rights. Jim Brown once said of Davis, "The way he carried himself, the way he did not drown in his tears, the way that he did not hang on his sickness, the way that he functioned as a human being under all of those conditions was tremendous courage." Most of Ernie's publicity came largely in the form of newspapers in the late 1950s. The Associated Press, a global news wire service, carried nearly all of Ernie Davis's sports narrative by sending breaking news to syndicated newspapers across the United States. Newspapers like the Register-Guard in Eugene, Oregon, and the Blade in Toledo, Ohio, ran most of the articles highlighting Davis's debut into the NFL. According to Wikipedia, AP was established in 1846 with headquarters in New York. It produces news articles in 3 languages, and they are distributed to over 1,300 newspapers and broadcasters. The AP website states that journalists use principles and procedures that shield AP reports from bias and inaccuracies. Considering that Davis's story was evolving during the height of the civil rights movement, this type of reporting was necessary to keep the focus on the facts and avoid any forms of editorializing. In 1941, AP joined the broadcast market and started transmitting news to radio stations. Articles about Davis were released by AP and then read over the airwaves to announce his athletic prowess. Even with such a raving media exposure that Davis was given, there were still questions about his commitment to play in the NFL. Davis was the first-round draft pick of the Washington Redskins in the 1961 NFL Draft. The Redskins owner, George Marshall, was known for not drafting African-American football players. The Washington Redskins are a professional American football team founded in 1932. They currently compete in the NFL National Football Conference East Division and play their home football games at FedEx Field in Landover, Maryland, with team headquarters in Ashburn, Virginia. Once again, Ernie was in the middle of a racial dispute since the Redskins were the last team in the NFL to be white only at the time he was drafted. Davis was quickly traded to the Cleveland Browns with a $65,000 three-year contract and a $15,000 signing bonus. It was stated to be the most lucrative rookie contract in history at the time. The Cleveland Browns are also a professional American football team that competes in the NFL American Football Conference, North Division. The group was founded in 1946 and plays their home football games at First Energy Stadium in Cleveland, Ohio, with team headquarters in Berea, Ohio. Jim Brown also played for the Browns as a star fullback when Davis was traded to join the team. His permanent football home and bright career were finally in place after a long and winding journey to play a game he loved so much. However, his love, his career, and his life would be cut short due to his battle with leukemia. Davis started to get nosebleeds and bleeding gums behind the scenes, which he figured were natural accompaniments to football's physical existence. Warnings began to show during practices between college and pro all-stars for an exhibition game. During preparation for the college all-star game in Chicago, Illinois, against the Green Bay Packers, he collapsed and was taken to the hospital for what was assumed to be the mumps. Davis was diagnosed with acute monocytic leukemia in the summer of 1962. Leukemia is a cancer of the body's blood-forming tissues, including the lymphatic system and the bone marrow. There are several forms of leukemia. In infants, certain types of leukemia are more common. Other kinds of leukemia exist mostly in adults. AMOL is a form of cancer explained by the rapid growth of abnormal cells built up in the blood and bone marrow to impede with normal development of blood cells. Leukemia typically affects white blood cells. White blood cells are potent infection fighters, naturally rising and dividing in an orderly way as required by the body. Once again, Davis was staring adversity in the face, and he was determined not to be the underdog. For a time, I was so despondent I would just lie there, not even wanting to move. One day I got a hold of myself. I decided I would face up to whatever I had to and try to beat it, Davis stated. When he was dying, Davis went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore 3 months after being diagnosed and witnessed 4 to 5 months of recovery via chemical therapies. Although he continued to practice with the Browns, he was never allowed to play in a game. Coach Paul Brown did not play him, heeding medical professionals' advice who warned him of the dangers. Ernie would never see a start for the Browns. He died in his sleep on May 18, 1963. Davis's impact on the non-sports world was probably equally as significant as in the sports world. His trials and challenges served as a testament to all that considered him to be a loser or predicted loser in a struggle or contest. Now, kids of minority cultures can dream big dreams of becoming a star athlete and not worry about the bigotry and discrimination that once existed. Davis's epic win of the Heisman Trophy was undoubtedly his most outstanding achievement as an athlete. He never realized the historic impact he made on African Americans' lives and those going to fight leukemia. In his case, Davis was a hero made, not born. The positive influences he had growing up, from his grandparents and his mother to the genuine and disciplined relationship with his coaches. These impressions led to the inspiration that children and adults could resonate with for years to come. In 1963, when President Kennedy learned Davis would be honored by Elmira with a school holiday, the president sent a telegram stating, "Seldom has an athlete been more deserving of such a tribute. Your high standards of performance on the field and off the field reflect the finest qualities of competition, sportsmanship, and citizenship. The nation has bestowed upon you its highest awards for your athletic achievements. It's a privilege for me to address you tonight as an outstanding American and as a worthy example of our youth. I salute you. There were many firsts for Ernie Davis leading up to him being the hero that he is recognized as today. He was the first freshman on the varsity squad at Syracuse. Davis was the first African American not only for the Syracuse University chapter, but for the national fraternity, to become part of Sigma Alpha Mu, a traditionally Jewish fraternity. He was crucial to leading the Orangemen to their first and only national championship. As stated before, he was the first African American to win the Heisman. He was also the first African American to be the first overall selection in the NFL draft. All these instances also represented him as being an underdog. The cultural and societal inspiration he delivered could have motivated sports icons like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Herschel Walker, and Kyler Murray. Perhaps it was Davis himself that said it best in a letter he wrote to the Saturday Evening Post editor, Tom Martin. Yesterday was my 23rd birthday. Compared to some, that doesn't seem like a whole lot of life to talk about. Thing is, I don't know how much more is in front of me. I'm not sure how to end this, or even if I want to. It's funny, most people think my life has been all about football. I've even thought that myself. But football is just a game. What matters is what you play for. Sometimes, when the game is close and everything is on the line, that's when you forget the crowd and the noise. That's when it's just you against somebody else, to see who is the better man. That's what I like about the game, because at that moment, you're friends and your enemies and your brothers. He wrote this letter in response to the newspaper's request for an article from Davis after being honored by the Browns at a preseason game. This form of character just proves that Davis's blood was most definitely thinner than his honor. Ernest R. Davis.